So there's this really interesting concept of frame I wanted to share with you gentlemen today. In respects to abstinence and celibacy, I actually believe that the variable that some people would describe as frame comes at a consequence of disciplining and retaining that particular, what would you say, desire from the feminine counterpart. And I'll tell you what I mean in just a moment. In respects to the male to female sexual dynamics, every single woman has this impression of man only wanting one fundamental thing. You hear it all the time. It's a very popular narrative amongst women. And what I believe constitutes such a strong sense of polarity and therefore attraction in a man that begins to practice the things that we discuss on this channel is that it's very, very confusing. It's very, very confusing because there is again this very broad schema and idea that she has ingrained into her very nervous system that when she's interacting with a man and potentially there is some romantic interest, that there is only one thing that this particular individual is going after, and he will do whatever it takes in order to ascertain that particular feature or benefit of the interaction between him and her. And what's really interesting, and I'll share a personal story about why I had this particular revelation, is that once your interactions are predicated by just self-amusement, fun, and levity, meaning you're just fundamentally there for the present moment and the experience and the humor and again the self-amusement that you are trying to meet, or the whimsy of the moment, you could also say, when you're interacting with another woman, there is the interaction that is free of that kind of, what would you say, longing and craving for sexual intercourse. And when there's an absence of that, she starts to freak out. She doesn't know how to behave. She has no reference points, and therefore you begin to fall into her particular frame because she can't figure you out. So I was at a hotel a couple of weeks ago, and there was this very cute receptionist, Latina girl there, very petite, Spanish, and very, very attractive. And I'd interacted with her because I'd been to the hotel before, so we had some initial rapport. And I was in a particular area of the country that I hadn't been there before, and I was going to stay overnight and not travel back. So I remember just asking her there on the spot, let's go for dinner later if you're not doing anything. And we did. And it was an enjoyable occasion again, a lot of and she was attractive, but again, from my kind of perspective, there wasn't that neediness, that craving, that, oh, if this particular thing doesn't happen, then the interaction is completely wasted. I was just there for the levity. I was just there for the whimsy of the particular moment. And I remember trying to set up another date, I suppose you could describe it as, probably a week after. And I was getting some kind of flaky energy, which was quite interesting. And then I remember I just said that, because a lot of guys will double text and they'll call and they'll be very kind of needy in that respect. And I remember I wasn't getting the response that I was desiring for that particular occasion. I believe we had made plans to do something, and then there was lack of confirmation from her side. And then she came back to me a little bit later. Are we still on for such and such? And I replied, well, no, I haven't heard from you. I've actually made other plans. Um, you know, Obviously you're very busy, maybe another time. Now, what was really interesting about that particular thing that I did is that I would have never have done that before. And I'll tell you what I mean is before I'd be so much into that wanting and that needing and making this thing happen and have every kind of all my validation and happiness predicated on getting a second day or a third day or a fourth day, that I would cancel any plans that I had. I would make it a complete priority. And then what I started to recognize almost indirectly when I started to move down this path of just being a little bit more conscious about my desires and using that energy for self-actualization as opposed to self-pleasure, is it shows you where your kind of chain of priorities go. she's coming back to me and she's saying, look, I'm sorry I didn't reply. And I'm starting to get a little bit more engagement from her side. She's starting to make plans for herself. And it's just it's really interesting because I try to put my mind in her particular perspective of somebody who is, again, trying with all their desires to try and meet with her, take her out for drinks, and eventually sleep with her. But then she meets an individual who perhaps is a little bit more conscientious of their self pursuits, their self actualization. That she doesn't know how come this person didn't drop what they were doing right now and try to rearrange something. And that is why I'm coming back to the preface of this particular video about this word frame. I really believe SR, celibacy, is synonymous with this idea of frame. You are keeping control of the interaction, and if you're courting somebody and they don't fall into your frame, they're falling outside of your frame, they're trying to test you, they're not texting you back as much, they're going for days on end without communicating with you. Perhaps they are, again, they're trying to test what they can fundamentally get away with, because they all know this, is that you're going to do, she's trying to ascertain how much she can get away with and you still pursue. And that starts to move the remit of control from yourself back into her. Because then she's kind of got you on a leash and she's kind of pulling you this way and that way, right? When you start to, as I've kind of prefaced with the story, keep the control, keep the frame, keep the kind of boundaries of what you will and will not tolerate very, very close to yourselves, it's almost like you become magnetic. You become very, very dense, and then she starts to fall into your rules, you could say. That's another way to describe it, is the rules of the interaction. So it's interesting, after I said that, you didn't reply in time, you didn't confirm, you're kind of getting the behavior you want. And this took me years and years. I'm going to be 30 next year. And you're more than welcome to say, Joseph, that's very, very obvious. But I didn't really discover this until I was about 25, because I was led by my impulses and my desires, apart from setting myself apart about what I will and will not tolerate from a female interaction. And though it may take longer, perhaps, to get where you want to go, if you want a girlfriend, if you just want sex, never compromise, never show your lust, your base desires, your neediness, your craving, your me, I need pleasure, I need that kind of fulfillment, because fundamentally it's going to be very, very cheap. You might get it, you might get intimacy, you might get sex, whatever the case may be, but it will be very, very short-lived, and also it will be on her terms. And as soon as you court in her frame, what you're also doing is, she is now dictating the parameters of a relationship should it move that way. So again, you might get what you want, you might get sex, you might get a girlfriend, but I promise you will not be in control. She'll probably end up sleeping with somebody else, or maybe being just a terrible girlfriend, going on girls' nights out, and she knows she can do that because she's pulled you into her orbit, when it should be the antithesis. So I suppose, in conclusion, one of the more prominent revelations I've been having is this concept of when you refrain and you control and you have more agency over your sexual reflex, you start to dictate the terms of the relationships predicated on the values that are besides that, which is very, very confusing for most women. Very, very confusing. And you'll start to get the more agreeable behavior as you start to demonstrate some mystery, some power, some self-assuredness, and fundamentally you get to lead. That's what you get to lead. Don't follow, lead. And that is the perfect description for frame. These aren't theories, gentlemen. Facts. Speak soon.